It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I have the honor and the pleasure of talking with Elisa Silverglade. She is the Director of Intelligent Automation at Techromatic, where she helps law firms streamline operations through custom software robotics powered by robotic process automation. Yep, that is a lot to say. Elisa brings 15 years of experience in managing law firms, offices, and diverse background in spanning finance, technology, and advocacy. Elisa and I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting through an organization through Women-Owned Law at this symposium. And we've just really had some great conversations. I said, I'm curious. I have to understand how you're automating, what you're automating. And as I've asked you a ton of questions, I finally said, let's do this on Her Success Story. So thank you for joining me here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So how did this whole career thing get started for you? Because technology is not my natural go-to. It's something I've had to learn. And so I always admire people who truly have their careers not just set in technology, but technology that is a fast-moving wave of the future.
Well, I've always been interested in technology, and my career has spanned a number of industries, including technology. So several years ago, probably now, actually right after in March 2020, actually not March 2020, when COVID settled down and quarantine lifted and people were spending time with each other again, I was spending time with Paul Smith, who's the CEO of Techromatic, and he and I are friends. And he was telling me about this new technology that he was using for a healthcare client, this robotic process automation that was going to automate the busy work for this healthcare client. And I became really fascinated with the technology. And my first thought was this would be amazing for lawyers because I managed a law firm for over 15 years. So, of course, our thoughts always go to where our own experience is. And at the time, the technology was actually really too expensive and unwieldy for lawyers. But Paul had faith in my ideas and my enthusiasm and said, well, come aboard and let's do this automation thing.
So when you're speaking to your clients that are law firms, you come from this experience of managing a law firm for 15 years. What were the bottlenecks that you saw that you wanted this technology to start helping with?
Absolutely. And of course, the firm that I was managing was a very small one, so it wouldn't necessarily be a good candidate for our technology, but I'm very familiar with the way a law office operates. So I was very drawn to this idea of all that repetitive task work, generating documents that are mostly the same every time, or filing things with the court, which are, again, you fill out this form that's the same every time, or generating retainer letters or contracts or any of that busy work, the grunt work, right? Because when I was working for that practice, and it was my ex-husband, but the most valuable thing I did for the practice was form relationships with clients and do kind of light level legal work. And everything else was just the grunt work that had to get done. And that's the stuff that we're automating.
I have to ask, when we talk about grunt work, and I'm a huge fan of getting rid of grunt work, but everybody's grunt work in so many different areas represent different things, right? So when we look at grunt work in the legal area, what would that look like?
It's sometimes harder to conceptualize because it's part and parcel of the intellectual work, right? So if it's a large company that's doing like a stamp, it's easy to say, oh, we're going to automate that stamp. But,
Right.
A lawyer says, oh, well, I have this 4-hour process and I'm a lawyer, so it can't be automated. But what we do is we take a look at that process from A to Z, and I'm looking for 3 buckets. I am looking for parts of the workflow that are standardized and straightforward that I know we can automate. I'm looking for work that I know we can automate, but it's more complex, so we're not going to do it at first. And I'm looking for the work that remains a human work. Okay? So for attorneys, let's say, for example, let's use a business lawyer, right? A business lawyer is going to have a core set of documents that they use for most of their clients. And maybe there's a few different template versions of each document, depending on the situation. And then further, depending on the situation, there's ancillary documents that get added in, right? And there's a lot of copying and pasting that goes on when editing these documents, and a lot of edits that are according to binary rules, right? Like, is it a Delaware company? Is it, what type of a company is it? How many shareholders? Where is it located? Like, these types of things will dictate how the documents are constructed. Those things can be automated. As long as it is according to a standardized set of rules and parameters, with automation, we can achieve 100% accuracy on those parts and then have the robot kind of serve it up on a silver platter to the attorney to finish it up with the legal work.
So, in simplifying it, right? What you might have to go in your firm to your law clerk, you're this, you're that, and then redo and fix and that, and the different layers. And it might be, depending upon how the firm is made up, how many people could be touching it and how many times the lawyer is then touching it.
Absolutely. So you can reduce a lot of that. So a lot of firms, their processes are built on the manual behavior of their people, which is natural. That's the only way we're going to do it, right?
Right.
But then as you add people, it tends to get clunkier instead of more optimized. So one of the first things that we look at when we discover the process is, how can we optimize this? Do you have too many cooks in the pot? Are there too many human touches? Is there a way to allow the bot to handle it and sort of purify the content so that people aren't putting their fingers into it? But like you said, we're taking a look at which parts of that can we automate. The parts that we want a human to do, we leave a human in the loop.
I love this image you just put out there of purifying, because that all of a sudden it's like, oh, like we put a filter on a faucet to purify something. That's something that is so simple and
Yeah.
relatable.
Yeah. And like, to take that into something that might make more sense to your listeners, let's think about how lawyers tend to gather information. Okay. It's typically going to be over the phone or over email, back and forth, maybe a series of questions, maybe some misunderstandings, maybe some missing information. But something that lawyers can do to streamline or purify that without even engaging big tech or any technology, or some, but is a web form. Like, Microsoft has web forms, Google has web forms.
Yeah.
Take your intake process and make it into a web form that you give the link to the client and they fill it out. And then what happens is, each time a person fills out that form, it populates a new row in an Excel spreadsheet, but it's basically a database. So then you end up creating this database of all the data that your clients are bringing in. And then when you're ready to automate, you have a database that the bot can access and manipulate and work from, that's not being, I don't want to say polluted, but that's, not being touched by humans that can make mistakes.
I have to ask, so now you've been doing this for a while. You get so excited by it.
I do.
And I always see when you talk about it, you light up. What has surprised you in leaning into this whole automation advancement of technology?
I mean, I think just the kind of the success and where I am. Like, if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be an expert in robotic process automation for law firms, I would have scoffed. I mean, I would have been like, I don't, not me. But yet here I am. And it's interesting because it's been this confluence, right? So even though I came to Techromatic when we were building bots in healthcare, I always had it in my mind, like, I really want lawyers to use this technology. So when we found different tech partners and we were able to offer it at a price point that was acceptable to lawyers, that was the moment when I was like, oh, this can actually happen like the way I've envisioned it, right? So progress is not always as fast as we want it to be, but we're kind of pioneers here. Like, I haven't found anybody else that is doing what we're doing with this technology the way that we're doing it. So the traction that we've gotten has been amazing to me. And that's where it's just been incredibly, validating and gratifying, but also really surprising, because not where I thought I might have ended up.
I'm going to throw this right at you. What are some of the successes? What are your clients talking about after they implement this?
So cool that you asked me this because just a couple weeks ago, we got such a great testimonial. We have a client who's a personal injury firm out of Virginia. They've got about 45 people and a team of 6 people processing medical records. Okay. So every
Right?
personal injury attorney has to get medical records for their clients.
Correct.
We built bots for this firm that generates the HIPAA high tech authorization form, sends it to the provider, downloads the record, right? The paralegal manager just emailed us the other day saying that the bot has saved her 6-person team 3 days a week, and she no longer has to work nights and weekends to stay caught up. And she said it's been a game changer, a lifesaver. And what we understand is that this entire department of 6 people basically had overnight new job descriptions, where before the robot, they were spending a good 80% of their day cranking out these documents, downloading documents, renaming, resaving, uploading, marking complete, grunt work. And now they spend most of their day using their brains. They're looking at what comes in. They're thinking about what comes in. They're determining what's missing, what's problematic. They're having conversations. They're solving problems. Guess what? That's a lot more satisfying than what's essentially data entry from 9 to 5. So that's really been huge. It's a great testimonial, but it also kind of proves that point about how this technology can really change the culture of work and what it looks like to go to work.
And I would think your people, in working with the culture of an organization, your people are more engaged because what they're doing is interesting.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Nobody likes doing this work. It's actually really funny when I talk to somebody who's like not in legal services and they'll say like, "Oh, the paralegals must hate you." And I was like, "When was the last time you talked to a paralegal?" Like they're not exactly so thrilled with all the paperwork they have, right? Like in legal services especially, paralegals become paralegals for a reason. Right? Like, you don't hear it like insurance. You won't hear an admin at an insurance company saying, "I always wanted to work in insurance." I mean, some. But like paralegals, you're going to have a lot more people who maybe they want to be lawyers. Maybe they like to be close to the law. They envision themselves as advocates. Maybe they watched a lot of Law and Order. Who knows? But they want to be close to the law. And then they get inundated with this paperwork that's not anything like legal work. So they're not really happy typically. So you take all that grunt work, you move it off their plates, and then they're finding themselves doing more valuable work, which is going to be more fulfilling. And it's just going to create a different way to work.
So when you're out there meeting law firms, and you do that regularly, what is something that you listen for? So, what can our listeners be listening for?
Well, listening for it's things like being inundated with paperwork. It's hearing about a revolving door on support staff positions or scaling with people. I have so much paperwork, I have to hire another person. These are great times to think about automating. Also, like anybody who's just interested in the technology, who's thinking, I should be using automation. Why am I not using automation? Right? Like that's something. And in terms of organizational structure, I mean, really any firm, if it's a small firm and it's a pure play, only estate planning, only divorce, only PI, whatever it is, then they're probably going to want to automate. But any firm that's over, 15, 20 people is probably generating a volume of work that they should be automating. So it's kind of for everyone. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
and there's,
it's
yeah.
it's fitting, you're a small firm that behooves them to invest in automation because they're going to invest in they need to invest in hiring. So if we automate, then we can hire more strategically.
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing you say,
Yes.
as well as
100%.
mid and large size firms that all of a sudden getting rid of that grunt work has their people more invested in the firm, the culture, the growth.
Yeah, and everybody wants to make more money, right? Like it's both. We want to do the right thing for our people and have a better work environment, but everybody wants to grow their business and make more money. And it's a kind of a no-brainer. Like you've got this automation, these bots are working 24/7, they're not making mistakes. The way our pricing model works is scaling, increases the ROI. We don't charge more when the bot is doing more. It just presents this really robust value proposition where you have this increase in productivity, efficiency, and accuracy, which obviously saves money. But then you also have this idea of now you've got these skilled, talented humans that you hired, and they have a lot more skill than what you're asking them to show in their day-to-day job. So now you have this reinvested time. What are you going to do with that time?
Yeah.
Well, chances are you're going to apply it to something more valuable to the firm and more fulfilling to the person.
Elisa, how can our listeners learn more, lean in, inquire from an educational perspective?
Reach out to me. I absolutely love, as you mentioned, I get very excited. I'm absolutely an evangelizer, but you can check out our website, techromatic.com. There is an RPA section of the website that dives in. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Elisa Silverglade, or you can email me, Elisa, Elisa, at techromatic.com, and tell me that you heard about me from Ivy's podcast, and I am happy to extend a discount. Actually,
Awesome.
mm,
All good. So, listeners, here's the thing technology is advancing. There's so many ways to lean in. And I'm not ever going to say do this versus do that or any of the above. What I will encourage you all to do is always be educated on the advancement and give yourself time and space to learn. Reach out to Alyssa, get educated, learn more about this. AI is here, automation is here. It's a matter of how we do it smartly for our companies, our firms, and how we use that to help scale. I always say this at this point of the show. Take a deep breath in. Feels so good. Identify one thing, one takeaway for yourself from Alyssa and I's conversation. And there were so many nuggets, but just pick one, jot it down somewhere, and make that decision. What are you going to do with this one takeaway? If we every week take away one thing from listening to her success story and implement one thing, we will be consistently moving forward in our businesses, in our lives, in our worlds. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me today on Her Success Story.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And listeners, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more great content, great guests, and a lot of fun. See you next time.